everyone, welcome to another Music Talk Tuesday, and today I thought it would be interesting to briefly discuss songs that are about the subject of school, or education, I guess you could call it as well. I thought it would be interesting to discuss, considering the fact that it's kind of ironic since we are pretty much in a stage now where school is pretty much finishing itself up for people. Unless you are in summer school. However, nonetheless, let me start by discussing the 4 songs that I wanted to discuss for this particular list. First being High School Confidential by Jerry Lee Lewis. This came out in 1958, I believe. And the interesting thing about this song is that it was actually written for a film. It's also the name of the film is also the title of the song, so it kind of shows you how a lot of the song was basically driven by the film. But regardless, not only is it a song for a film, but it's also a song that addresses school in a rather interesting way. Instead of focusing on a very deeply insightful understanding of school, this song takes a little bit of a more simpler approach, but at the same time it's still a lot of fun. And that approach is basically showcasing school in the form of sort of socializing. In particular, the song mentions sort of, how it's basically about community and trying to kind of bring people in and sort of enjoy the social environment that's involved with school. And basically in doing so, as part of sort of the dancing, they all do the high school hop. And that's kind of an essential sort of part of the song as well. But this song in particular reminds me a lot of like the dances that high schools in particular would have. Even within middle school, they have those similar dances too, at least when I was there. I think this sort of kind of idea of making school sort of a fun social thing didn't really start until sort of the later, or basically the later 40s, 1950s, and 60s era, basically. And I think a lot of that had to do with, the kind of culture that was going on during the time, and how America was pretty much at its prime stage. So it only makes sense that there would be some kind of, sort of prosperity and joy, and I guess a sense of community too. And part of that, I think, was largely what a lot of the schools were based on back in those days. And to a certain extent now, you could say, but since schools have probably gotten a lot bigger and have drawn a lot more influence, it's kind of made itself, I think, a little bit more complicated and different. But it seemed like back then you could clearly tell that there was sort of this simplicity and also this sense of fun to it, and that largely involved that social aspect, which I think really works well for this kind of a song. And it definitely has that later 1950s vibe. I really do enjoy how elaborate the instrumentals are, and it does sound a lot like something that would come out of Back to the Future, in particular the first film where they go back to the 50s. It really does have that very traditional sound of kind of rock and roll that and pop that the times we're really accustomed to. And for that, it's very enjoyable. It makes you want to get up and dance and have fun. And this kind of tries to show school in a little bit more of a positive light by not focusing on the books and all that, but on the sort of community and kind of getting together and just dancing and having fun. And I think that's interesting, and it was also, I think, in particular, the time period that sort of started this trend of making school a more social part um, of the community and of the kids within the school. So without further ado, let me address the next one that I wanted to address on this list, because that's, I think, all I can say about the first song. And that is School's Out by Alice Cooper. This song is very rebellious in its nature. You kind of feel the hard rock, 80s rock energy coming out of this song. But there's also a sense of kind of relief too, like there's being a weight lifted off your shoulders because you don't have to be tied down to sort of the burdens of school, or that school puts upon your shoulders, so to speak. And you don't have to have anything kind of on the back of your mind, and you don't need to you don't need to feel constrained by this one particular environment. And I think that's something that I think a lot of people can identify with. I think a lot of people feel that school is kind of or at least is sort of designed to be kind of, not necessarily a prison, but at the same time like a trap, so to speak, where you can't really go anywhere. You're stuck there for so and so many hours a day, every 5 days a week, at least. So that's, I think, really the approach this song was going with. Not so much of a positive angle, but more so a negative attitude towards school. And in doing so, I think it comes off as very effective. You feel you feel like how you really do feel the sense of being not in that stage anymore, or at least for a while, where you have to be obligated to go to school. And I think that's kind of what the was kind of the message the band, or what initially Alice Cooper intended for the song to really be. But I think you can interpret it various different ways. I think it's also nice that they added in kids actually sort of singing part of the song as sort of a chorus. So again, it knows how a lot of kids in particular feel about school, and how it's such a relief to not have it constantly be put upon you to have to go to school. So that's, I think, really ultimately, though, all I can say about that song. It has a really different approach to it, but at the same time, I think it comes off as so much as much of a strong effect as a positive song about school does, like in the first song that I mentioned. Second to last song that I wanted to mention for this video is probably the most well-known and probably the most, I guess you could say, successful song on this list, and that's Another Brick in the Wall by Pink Floyd. This song is unbelievable in how well it's executed. It just has this awesomeness, and it addresses school in a rather interesting way. Instead of focusing on being purely rebellious like the previous song that I mentioned, or being lighthearted like the first song, it kind of paints a very, very grimmer picture when it comes to school and how we educate children. Um, and I like how the song kind of, um, it kind of shows, it kind of shows children kind of being produced to sort of be machines, so to speak. You'll see that within the music video. Um, and how they're kind of designed to, kind of be sort of robotic, because a lot of the times school often gets the bad rap, obviously, of being very dull and, uh, repetitive and not interesting. And as a result, when children are eventually brought out to the real world, it makes it a lot more difficult for them to, you know, have a sense of maybe identity or purpose, because they've been trained all their lives to be these sort of robots, so to speak, because it reflects onto the very kind of authoritarian nature that schools across at least the United States, I believe, have. It's not saying that every school or every educational institution does this, but it seems to be very, um, it just seems to be designed purely to boss people around and tell them how to do things. And every school has their own set of rules and structure and whatnot. And sometimes that really strict authoritarian approach doesn't really work on children, and in the end doesn't really end up benefiting them as far as an education is concerned. Um, in other words, sort of the school damages the ability for kids to kind of, you know, be their own person, because um, a lot of the times schools, there might be some, there might be some, brainwashing, or, all these other things that could come from being in such an environment, depending on the kind of school that you obviously attend. Um, and I think it's just bringing those negative aspects that are involved with this environment to light, and not trying to shy away from it. And I think that's important, because the more we know, and kind of understand how our school kind of operates, the more we're, I think, capable of realizing that maybe some people who I felt had my best interests in mind maybe don't really care as much. And I think that there's just so many different things that you can get out of this song, as far as, you know, as far as what it means to really be educated, and if really we're educating really in the right way. So I think that's really, the song really just nails that concept on its head really well, and just the very kind of dull but yet also kind of rebellious side involved, because there seems to be kind of an anger that the children have when they're singing, but at the same time they sound so robotic, like they sound the exact same, that it just shows you that how much their brain is just been filled with things that may have not actually ended up benefiting them, or helping them. And I think that's definitely something that's really lacking in our education system, is just the ability to um, to really approach things on a level that um, that allows the coming generation to really succeed. And I think that's really what it all comes down to, is just all in all, everyone's just another brick in the wall going through the sort of education system, and that's kind of what the song was driving at, and I think it really works. Very enjoyable and very interesting. Last song that I wanted to mention for this list, School Day by Chuck Berry. Basically, the kind of interesting way this song approaches school is that it discusses school in a way, in a more typical way. It's not trying to express a really in-depth meaning, or is trying to be completely rebellious or very positive. So much as just describes the average typical day of a student. And a lot of what he says throughout the song is kind of the sort of experiences that I've gone through, where I don't have time to eat my lunch, or, it's off to the next class, and, you're just sitting there, doing whatever work and hoping you pass and all that jazz. And it's even though it feels very routine, it's still very entertaining as far as its vocals and instrumentals. And it also kind of brings to light sort of a little bit of relief, because you see that the student ultimately gets to leave school and end up doing something that he enjoys doing. So that's kind of the angle that this song takes, and I think it really works in being very identifiable and sort of down to earth. It's not so wild in its concepts, but it is one that I think is rather enjoyable, and has this sort of positive, upbeat attitude, while at the same time addressing kind of things in a more typical light, but not so much trying to hammer in deep concepts like the previous song that I mentioned, Pink Floyd song, does. But at the same time, that doesn't make it any better, any worse than any of the other songs that I mentioned, but it makes it rather interesting, I think, and unique. But yeah, those are all of the songs that I have for this list. I'd be more than happy to hear what other people have to say in regards to their favorite songs that are kind of about school. But yeah, I think that's really ultimately all I can say. I'll be sure to put links below to all of the songs so that you may view them for your enjoyment. And I think that's really ultimately all I can say. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you all have a pleasant day, week, a month, and a year. And I hope to see you all in the next video. Bye-bye.